Hey, okay, last time we were looking at this application over here, the Isolate Explorer, Flutter application that is written in Lisp, of all things, closure Dart, using the matrix state manager. And I tried to convey what it was like to program with a state manager, with a spreadsheet, if you will, which makes no sense, right? We think procedural. That's what we're used to. How are you gonna make things happen the way we normally do with a spreadsheet? And I tried to cover that last time, but I realized I kind of skipped a lot of the details. And I was talking about dominoes, and I talked about these four these four dominoes. There are about 12 dominoes in the whole thing. So I think it'd be really helpful to go through all of them and to discover that, yeah, this is how we can program with by setting up formulas uh, of important state that will be transformed as the situation unfolds. And really, the only unfolding required in this case by me is the user is going to click on the spawn button, and and when that's going to kick off a cascade of changes and activities that's going to lead to a health check being executed. And bam, there it is. It's green. That happened fast, right? Because it's 100 milliseconds is the interval right now. So we can look at checking a prime number twice really badly, 9,041,041. And I'll click this and we can say, oh no, oh no, yay. Okay, so I went through some changes there before deciding that coming up with, yeah, it is a prime number. The algorithm was awful. So, deliberately, so we wanted to have a chance to see this thing work. So let's take a look at the full sequence. I was looking at these four dominoes, which have now been, you might notice, broken out into their own object, their own standalone matrix object that will let the app not quite have so much noise in its definition. If we go back to the app, that bad boy is over here, and all those fields used to be cluttering up this thing. So let's look at the whole sequence of dominoes. We go back here. We can clear the ISO, and when I click on that button, what's going to happen? Well, that's a button. Okay, let's go find that button. On off. That's the on off button. Clear spawn. All we do is this. When we press it, we simply toggle one property of the app. And you might say, well, how does that, and that leads to a health check? Yeah. It's kind of fun setting these things up, because you'll see it's like, okay, where is ISO up? Oh, wow, it's nothing but an input variable. Okay, but we're starting it as false. If we started as true, we'd have an ISO when we started up. So by toggling this to true, how does that make this thing run? Well, down here we have a formula that is watching that property. And as soon as that goes to true, it's going to spawn an isolate down here, right here. So, and by the way, as soon as it goes false, this value will evaluate to nil, and the watch function will say, hey, the prior value was an isolate. I should kill it. And actually, it's okay if it's already dead or something like that, because Flutter is very gracious about, and the isolate package is very gracious about allowing multiple kills. I digress. So this is the first little trick, is the toggling of this one input variable by the user. That's what input variables are for. Makes the ISO be created, and that actually kicks off some cause and effect, some domino knocking over that is purely in the Flutter domain, in the Dart domain. Because when we spawn an isolate, if you're not familiar with those, what we do is we send over a function and a waj of data. So what is our slow prime worker? I think I have that right here. So this will get kicked off on the isolate, and it's passed that message and as the parameter, and it looks at it. See, there's a message type and a toMain property that are being pulled out. This is closure, by the way, destructuring. And the first thing it does, it makes its own port for communication back that the main isolate can use. And it turns, as soon as this function gets kicked off, it sends back a handshake. It sends back its port with the message type config, the same message type it got. And so that's the next step in the dominoes falling. What happens after that is the listener, as soon as it sees that the ISO exists, it starts listening on the receive port. And by chance, the first thing it will get back is config. It doesn't have to be the first thing. I'm actually filtering. I've seen example code that assumes the first thing back is, I try to identify it positively by checking the message type. It says, oh, I got a config, and here's another mate. Now we're back to matrix. mset me 2ISO. Oh, big deal. You saved the 2ISO in one of your properties. And notice here's 2ISO, by the way, which is also an input nil. Now, the user is not setting this with a button click, but the Flutter and Dart and isolate API is sending back a message, and they are basically outside the matrix. And here's where we connect the information, the handshake back from the isolate into the matrix. And now we have 2ISO is not nil. Big deal. So what? Well, now this next field this is how the health monitor gets created. Now you might notice, hey, that means you're always going to have a health monitor. Yeah, this is a simplifying design choice at this point. We could also make this optional. But right now, just to get this health monitor off the ground, I said, you know what, let's simplify things. As soon as we have the ISO, as soon as we get back the port that we can talk to the ISO, we're going to create our health monitor. And that's what this code is saying here. When I've got an ISO, yay. When I've got the 2ISO, yay. Are we paused? Nope. We create a health monitor. And again, note that when any of those conditions goes to false, this will evaluate to nil. And when this evaluates to nil, some internal matrix magic is watching the values of all matrix objects. And it's going to see that there's onquiesce. Well, let's look at that. Here's our health monitor. It has one of the properties, the health clock, has an onquiesce function. And so as soon as the health monitor goes out of existence, the matrix internals will see that, find this property, find there's an onquiesce function, and call it. Maybe I'll enable that print statement so you can see that. Well, no, let's just keep moving. It'll probably come up during the course of events. Okay, so we've decided to make a health monitor, and that was the next domino, was that the 2ISO got created. When the 2ISO got created, the health monitor got created. And as soon as the health monitor gets created, it makes a timer. As we said, we've decided our design is we're going to start health checking immediately, no question. So it makes the timer, and the timer, as soon as it fires, kicks over another domino. It actually makes a health check, and it makes it by writing it into this property. Again, this is a input property because now it's not a person that is interacting with the matrix. It is a timer that is triggering the matrix to do something. And what does the matrix do when it sees a health check? When check, and this is just a watch function on this property. So the timer is writing to this guy all the time. So when it gets an actual check, it says, okay, I gotta ping that over to the isolate. And ISO ping is a function which literally just talks to ISO and sends over this information controlled by before next event, blah, blah, blah. And so this is a kind of a domino, which is again going outside the matrix, right? Because it's going to be received by should we look at that? It's going to be received by the, this is a health monitor. It's going to be received by the isolate worker. And this guy up here says, this is the worker that's listening to the port, and this is over on the isolate. and it says, oh, I got a health check. And it's not doing anything matrixy. It just sends back the information it was given, which is how health checks, how pings are supposed to work. It sends over, ping sends over the response that it would like to get back. So we do that. We turn right out and get it, but we wrap it in a new message, which is health type check ACK. Again, just trying to be positive, make positive identification. And where does that go? Actually, the main worker, where's our main listener, doesn't care. It checks for config, which is how it got the 2 ISO, you may recall. But anything else, it just jams into a worker message. And again, so now worker message, where's that? Worker message, it's just an input variable, because again, here's information coming from outside the matrix. It's gone over to the isolate. It's asynchronous. It's eventually going to come shooting back on a port when the isolate Dart Flutter logic decides to send it over. So we have to wait on that with an input property and watch the input property. And now we're doing it. Did we send over a health check? I think we sent over a health check. So that's just going into the worker message queue, well, worker message property. And what happens is, having sent the health check, this guy says, all right, I'm going to watch the worker messages. And if I get something which is labeled health check ACK, if that's the message type, I'm going to let that through, and we're going to return that as the value of health ACK. Oh, big deal. So you manage, well, we filtered out any other information that would be coming through, which is the important thing. But right now, health ACK has effectively been triggered, and this is a formula. This is not an input, because it's able to compute off of the input variable, the worker message. And now that we have a health ACK, what can we do? Well, the health decision, maybe I should call it health status. The health decision can look at the check, it can look at the ACK, it can look at the timestamps on those guys, and it can decide, am I dead, am I slow, or am I healthy? Now you might say, well, that's great. So now we have a property on the health monitor which says whether it's healthy or not. What does that do for us? Well, this guy is watched by our interface, because it is an application, right? I mean, the user is wondering what's going on. So where do we? Oh, so this is the widget that displays the ISO health. We're almost there, right? And it's watching. What's it watching? It should be watching the health property. Oh, so it's over here. So if it's paused, now here, yeah. First of all, it's not going to do anything until it's got an ISO. So that's why we see ... over here. If this formula doesn't come up with a useful health, it just says ... But once we have an ISO, it's going to look and see if we're paused. If we're paused, let's do some of this. Okay, so right away it gets a health check. Let's pause it, and now we're going to show a different icon sync disabled, good name, and then we resume it, and another health check goes through, and so we get set up as healthy, and then finally. Right. So basically, if it's not paused, now it's watching. First of all, it makes sure there's a health monitor, and once it knows there's a health monitor, because that's async. Remember, that doesn't get created until the handshake has been completed. It reads the health property of the health monitor and decides which icon to show, or if nothing, then because it got something it did not expect. Like at the beginning, I think it sends over unchecked, something like that. It says like, we haven't checked yet, don't worry. So it just shows ... And that is actually the end. Oh, shall we look at that? So we'll kick this off. And because the health check is out there running every 100 milliseconds, it's kicking off that whole sequence we saw before. And if we do that again, it says yellow, red, green. Okay, we finally got our answer. And that's the status. And that is how a matrix-driven, a reactive program works. And I think I got all the pieces this time. And it's kind of fun setting up all these dominoes, each one being very simple and manageable. But the sum being greater than the parts is why a lot of us, once you start programming with matrix, you're going to say, oh, it just works. But you're going to have to experience that for yourself. I can't sell you on that. Okay, so give it a shot. See what you think, and see me on the Closurian Slack if you need help. Cheers.